All right, let's jump right into it. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're tackling a really fascinating intersection of business, marketing, and corporate accountability. Think about it. If you've ever watched a big sporting event, mindlessly scrolled through social media, or even played a video game, you've almost certainly seen an ad for an alcoholic beverage. But have you ever actually stopped to wonder how those massive beverage companies prove their marketing is reaching the right audience? Today, we're zeroing in on a very specific, highly structured corporate goal. We're going to explore exactly how beverage companies calculate the precise percentage of their advertising impressions that are made on individuals at or above the legal drinking age across TV, print, and digital platforms. It's a massive mathematical and logistical puzzle, and we're going to break the whole thing down step by step.
Now, to do this properly, we aren't just guessing or making things up. We are going straight to the gold standard of corporate sustainability reporting. All the definitions, the formulas, and the calculations we'll be looking at today, they come directly from the SASB Sustainability Accounting Standards. Specifically, we're looking at the 2023 version for the alcoholic beverages industry. SASB, which by the way is now part of the IFRS Foundation, creates the exact industry-specific metrics that global corporations use to report their risks to investors. So this is the real inside baseball framework that the major brewers, distillers, and vintners literally use to track their global impact.
So, here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. First, the high stakes involved. Second, defining the terms. Third, the core metrics formula. Fourth, tracking media platforms. And finally, the bottom line.
Section 1. The high stakes involved.
Okay, before a company can even start measuring a metric, there has to be a pretty profound reason to do it in the first place, right? Well, the corporate reporting standard lays out the reality bluntly. Irresponsible consumption of alcoholic beverages leads to severe negative social externalities. The SASB standard explicitly lists things like drunk driving, addiction, and underage drinking. Because every single year, alcohol consumption contributes to millions of deaths worldwide, and tragically, that includes a sizable proportion of underage youth and young adults. So the stakes for getting this marketing right and actively keeping it away from vulnerable populations absolutely could not be higher.
And these societal harms translate directly into some incredibly acute financial and regulatory risks for the brands themselves. If companies fail to manage these social externalities, they might be forced to internalize the costs. What does that actually mean for them? It means heavy taxes, massive lawsuits, and severe reputational harm. Ultimately, a failure to market responsibly can lead to really unfavorable regulation and the complete loss of a company's social license to operate. So in short, tracking exactly who sees their ads isn't just some nice PR move. It is a vital, essential shield against extraordinary expenses and long-term liabilities.
Section 2. Defining the terms.
To avoid those massive risks we just talked about, companies have to build a mathematical formula that investors can actually trust. And that means we need to demystify some of the jargon. First up, the advertising impression. The standard defines this as a measure of the number of times an advertisement is seen, heard, watched, or read, and it casts a surprisingly massive net. We aren't just talking about a billboard on the highway or a page in a magazine. The standard explicitly includes TV, the internet, interactive video games, and even advert games. Yeah, if a licensed mascot or celebrity film tie-in puts a brand in front of an audience, it counts as an impression. The whole shebang.
The second absolutely vital term here is the legal drinking age. The standard defines this as the minimum age at which a person can purchase alcoholic beverages under applicable jurisdictional laws or regulations. It's really important to clarify that this isn't some universal global constant. A global beverage brand has to adjust its tracking depending entirely on the specific local jurisdiction where that particular advertisement is deployed.
But here is a really fascinating caveat. What happens if a company is marketing in a region that has absolutely no established drinking age? Well, in countries lacking a legal minimum purchase age, the accounting standard strictly dictates that companies must default to using 18 years old to determine impressions made on legal age individuals. This ensures there are zero loopholes. There is always a baseline for accountability that stays consistent with international guiding principles.
Section 3. The core metric formula.
All right. Now that we have our definitions locked in, here is the exact mathematical calculation required by the standard. To find their compliance percentage, a company relies on a pretty simple fraction. The numerator, so the top number, is the total number of advertising impressions made on individuals at or above the legal drinking age, and the denominator, the bottom number, is just the total number of advertising impressions made, period. You divide the legal age impressions by the total impressions, and boom, you get your standardized percentage. It's elegant in its simplicity for sure, but as you can probably guess, it is a massive logistical headache to actually track in the real world.
Section 4.
Tracking media platforms.
So this is where we finally solve the mystery of how companies actually estimate audience ages across completely different mediums. Let's start old school, with traditional media. For broadcast platforms like television and radio, as well as physical print media, brands rely on long-established industry tools. The standard specifically points to the use of gross rating points and target ratios to determine these impressions. Basically, these are aggregated statistical models. They estimate how many people, and of what specific demographics, were tuned into a channel or reading a specific publication right when the ad ran.
But traditional tracking looks vastly different when you compare it to our modern digital landscape. For electronic and digital media, think internet ads, mobile apps, third-party websites, companies utilize a totally different methodology. Here, they use direct data. They calculate the total number of ads viewed and cross-reference that directly with specific audience demographics provided by the digital platforms. Because digital platforms often have registered users with known ages, the tracking shifts away from those broad statistical ratios and moves toward much more direct, demographic-based impression counts.
Now, the standard gets particularly fascinating when it handles the trickiest category of them all, embedded advertisements. Think about a slick product placement in a movie, or a branded billboard natively sitting inside a video game world. You obviously can't track that with a simple web click. So for these, the SASB standard allows companies to use expected audience size estimations. These are based on the content's rating and reach, combined with audience demographics and post-viewing recall measures. Basically, surveys testing if specific age groups actually remember seeing the brand. It is an unbelievable logistical effort to ensure every single media format is somehow accounted for in that core metric formula we looked at earlier.
Section 5. The bottom line.
So we have seen the risks, the definitions, and the math. The overarching goal here is to prove, with real, auditable data, that a beverage company is taking concrete steps to limit its exposure to underage populations, thereby protecting its social license to operate. But I want to leave you with something to chew on. We just looked at how companies track impressions across traditional TV, print, targeted digital platforms, and even embedded video games, but as the digital landscape accelerates headfirst into augmented reality, AI-generated content, and decentralized platforms, tracking exact audience ages is only going to get harder. So as digital media formats rapidly evolve, how will the definition of a responsible advertising impression have to adapt? Can strict mathematical calculations even survive in a world of untrackable media? It is a massive, incredibly important question for the future of corporate accountability. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the tough questions.